Bonjour, buenas noches, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you're joining from, and welcome to this exclusive live webcast on building a culture of empathy for productivity and innovation. We hope with this program we can help you reflect, learn, and ensure accountability while allowing for more empathetic human leadership styles and to develop a unified cross-organizational strategy to improve the working environment. We all know that happy employees make happy customers, right? And research has shown that the organizations that foster trusting, cooperative relationships are more likely to have a more satisfied, engaged, and more productive and innovative workforce. So how do we embed empathy in organizational culture so that our employees want to stay with the company and serve those customers? My name is Cindy Scholz. I am your host for today. I am a virtual L&D manager for the BeNext team of People Matters, and it is my privilege to welcome Godlieve van Doren for this exclusive webcast. Godlieve is a partner at Mercer and leads Mercer's career products in Asia, Pacific, and India zones. Her industry focus areas include high-tech, e-commerce, consumer goods, and retail. She also leads diversity and inclusion initiatives for Mercer for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and supports organizations in implementing D&I policy in the region. In her role as Asia Career Business Leader, she drives the innovation and expansion of Mercer's career products and services, empowering more clients in their business and workforce transformation as they navigate the realities of a post-COVID world. A very warm welcome to you, Godlieve. I'm so excited that you're joining us today.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Very, very glad to be here.
Great. So the format for today's webcast will be what we call a fireside chat. Godlieve and I will have an informal conversation about some of the tools and methods for accelerating the transition to a business where purpose and profit coexist, as well as build, nurture, and grow organizational empathy from the top down. And we will just pretend we're sitting around a fire while doing that. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. We're looking for a fascinating conversation, so please don't be shy. Now, I'm not able to see the chat, but my miracle workers behind the scenes will keep an eye on it. And if you have any questions and we have enough time, we will make sure to ask them as well. If not, we will save the questions for one of the live sessions during the program, so no questions will go to waste. Now, many of the topics we'll discuss today and many more obviously are addressed in great length in our 5-week cohort-based certification program, which begins on August 30th. And there's a lot of ground to cover on this subject. So if you are ready, Godlieve?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Brilliant. All right, first question. How do we as leaders even start this journey towards an empathetic workplace culture? Where do we start tackling something as complex and subjective as empathy?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And I think taking a step back, there's already some confusion around what empathy is, right? The word itself.
Yeah.
And at times also some confusion with that it's like being nice or being kind. Now, being nice and kind is incredibly important. I would argue. Um,
I would agree.
exactly. But that's not truly the meaning of the word. Empathy is the basis of empathy is curiosity. It's the ability to place yourself in someone else's shoes and look through their eyes on, how they see the world or the workplace in this case, right? So empathic leaders could start with asking a lot of questions, right? So to make it so big is, I'm going to be empathetic, right? That doesn't make any sense. But there's some base behaviors below that you can really well build as a leader that will likely lead to that culture. So one is definitely asking questions. Don't assume, ask. Check in with your different people. See what's on their mind. See how they look at your workplace. And put your personal bias aside, which I know extremely hard, right? Because we humans are terribly biased. And that serves us well in most cases, but really deliberately switching that off. And asking questions and waiting for answers while you do so is incredibly important. And I think the other element, Cindy, that we need to highlight here, for you to get answers that make sense, you also need to create a culture that builds trust. Because you can ask all you want, but if you haven't worked on psychological safety in the workplace, you can ask all you want, but people will tell you what you want to hear. So if you were to start, right, those elements, now not easily done, but a good starting point.
Right. So ask, check in, be curious, put your biases aside, and make sure it's safe to speak up. Because I totally agree. If it's not safe, nobody's going to say anything, and you're never going to make a change. Great. All right. Next one. How can we make empathy a part of our organizational culture so that we engage our talent and the desire for them to stay as a result of that?
Yeah, and again, really good question, right? Because you can't also go randomly asking questions all the time, right? That doesn't make sense. So
Yeah,
there needs to be some method to the madness, right? Of constantly listening. Now, in the past, if you look at how organizations used to tackle that, and that's also pre-COVID, and sometimes COVID changes things also in a very good way, right? The silver lining of that. We used to have these traditional engagement surveys. Everyone knows these. Like they're a bit of the lengthy questionnaires, a bit of monsters at times, right? And we would analyze the results, and then we come up with what's going on in the minds of employees. That you can still do to do a regular sense check. But what is more important, that if you want to be truly empathetic, is that you start to listen to people during the moments that matter, as we call it. So everyone has a journey, both personally and in the workplace. And it's important that you start asking the right questions at the right time. So if you look at an employment journey, it's probably a good idea to check in with people just after they've landed for a month. How are you settling in? That's the moment that mattered, right? What have you seen so far? What does strike you about our organization? What do you think we can do better? Because people come in with fresh minds. Then another point could be after you are promoted, right? Or when you take up a new role. So really looking at these, or you've done an important project, right? And then having a good set of questions tally to that. And then you need to overlay that with personal changes that people are going through. Because ideally, you create a workplace where different types of people can work. But guess what? People change over time. You may get married. You may have children. You may go through a difficult time where you lose people, right? And making sure that you then check in as well to see how people are doing, that you've got a really great anchor point, I would say, and a journey you can map and start to track that over a longer period of time. I think that's going to be critically important.
Absolutely. And I think I love how you say the circumstances change, and sometimes we forget that because someone might be doing fine one month and totally different the next because of family issues or because of personal issues, and we have to stay on top of that. And what I would like to add to that is I think the surveys are still, as long as we have psychological safety to begin with, the surveys can still be a really good tool of measuring data.
I agree.
But you have to do something with it. So many times you hear there was another survey and nobody ever talked about it again after that, and we never did anything. We never took any next steps.
And Cindy, you raised such a good point. And then people also stop talking, because what's the point?
Yeah.
I've given you my feedback. You've done nothing with it. So also communicating that you're not doing something is worth it, right? So I've heard you, but I can't cater for all.
But right now,
message, or like we don't have the funds, or we're on this journey, or I need to choose between. You hire people you hire good people, right? I hope. So giving them
that would be the plan.
that you also understand, and that you can trust them to balance that, because quite often in my area of work, when I ask leaders, like, why don't you ask more questions? And they say, then we may give the impression that
we care.
We can do these things. Not we care, but we can't do this. So if you ask people about pay or their benefits, but maybe then they'll think that they're going to get more pay or more benefits, and that's a very low trust assumption, because you hire good people again, and they will understand, if they're the right people, that you're not a charity, right? You also need to make profit, and you need to balance. If they don't, then it's a whole different hiring issue. So taking people as responsible adults is very helpful in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. All right, next one. How does empathy sustain productivity and innovation? How can the leaders watching this create these links in their respective organizations?
Yeah, and the return
Sorry,
on
that's a tough
investment
one.
of what we do, right?
Yeah,
Yes. Well, actually, the answer is fairly simple, right? But can you really tally empathy with, profit? Maybe harder. But what you can
yeah,
start to track is metrics around your attraction power, your retention power, and the feedback that you're getting again through surveys, because you can ask people about their productivity, and usually they're very honest about it.
yeah,
And we do this again regularly as well. Do you feel that you're productive? Do you feel that you're adding value? Do you feel that you are creating new things? Do you feel that you are not wasting your time on non-value add work? So in that sense, if we agree that people in an environment where there's trust and empathy and understanding, um, we can retain people longer, that's a direct impact on productivity because tenure drives value. You can talk about it many ways you want. There's lots of studies available where it's very clear if you can hold on to your people a little bit longer, they will drive value for your organization in dollar amounts. And having the right workplace environment where you are making people do the best things they can with their skills will attribute to that. Is that a direct correlation? Or if I'm being more empathetic, then my profit goes up? That's hard. But I think we could all agree, right, that creating a positive environment where people can speak their minds and are understood and others are curious about them also drives innovation.
yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree that people and they need to feel valued. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest things that I've heard in the past, I don't know, 2 decades. If you feel valued, it doesn't really
Mhm.
matter what your job is.
Mhm.
But if you feel valued at what you do, you like what you do.
Yeah.
And that, cascades into many, many other things.
Yeah.
All right. Um, Great answer, by the way. And so in the program, you talk about empathy is about a lot more than just kindness, like you started
Yeah.
this session. But without giving too much away, what are some of the practical approaches to develop this trait as leaders and at the end of the day as humans even?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think it's a host of you know things you will need to tackle. And we talked about bias for a bit. I think that's an important component, right? You need to start creating awareness of where you're making assumptions about what people think. Or oh, they look like this, so they must be X, Y, Z. And to give you an example, we've seen this in the pandemic. When we went in first, like, oh, people that are single actually are fine. They can work virtually. They're young, right? So what's the problem? They're all technology driven. But the folks with kids and a family, they may be struggling much more, right? Because they have these responsibilities. Now that turned out to be not true in most cases. But when we started to really listen to people and ask them, how are you feeling? How are you really doing? And again, wait for the answer, right? I think how are you now has a different meaning,
Yeah,
right? People are willing to listen. We found out that the groups that we assumed were young and technology driven suffered in silence, mentally, quite often as well, being extremely lonely
yep,
and feeling excluded. Whereas those with the family, and okay, may not have been nice that the kids were running around and breaking down the house while you were on a call, but a family tends to give structure and a
yep,
cushion, right?
yep,
And these are all kinds of assumptions that people made in the beginning that we needed to reset. So I think part of that is acknowledging that you are full of assumptions, and that's you're subjective. So a lot of training should also go into what are some of the tools that I can use to push it aside once in a while and listen. And then other things as well, using the right tools and technology. Again, the moments that matter. Do you have a journey for that? Do you use technology in the right way to get more answers? So there are many elements beyond the kindness aspect that you
Yeah.
could do.
I remember in the early pandemic, I think in the Netherlands, it started in March 2020. And I remember after a couple of weeks, I was still with Boeing at the time, and I had a call with one of my colleagues, and she was living alone. And one of the first things I said was, how are you holding up? And she
Yeah.
almost broke down in tears. And she said, you're the first person in weeks that asked me that question. I
Mm.
have not been asked, how am I really in weeks? And she was like, I'm okay. I'm holding, I'm holding on, I'm hanging in
Mm.
there. But that hit a nerve with me. I'm like, you see, that's like you said, the
Yeah.
assumptions of, oh, it must be great to not have kids and not have anyone running around and being
Yeah.
able to focus while working at home. And it was completely the other way around. She said, I would be so much more productive in the office if I could see some faces around me and
Yeah.
you know, have a coffee with someone.
I
Yeah,
totally
brilliant.
agree. And Cindy, actually, you because of your answer, and I think that's a really powerful story. You highlight something that I forgot to mention. For a leader to display the right behavior, you need to be feeling well yourself.
Yeah.
So part of, if you want to make that change, is ensuring that leaders are also asked, how are you? What are you doing? And there's been a trend of the sacrificing leaders, right? I'm not a big fan of that, because I think to lead in an environment like this, you need to be feeling extremely well yourself, both physically, mentally, financially, right? That all needs to be sound, because how else are you going to provide a good environment and listen to people if your head so full of
Right.
your own sorrow, right? Which is, you're only human, and because it at times gets lonely at the top, it does. Who is asking you how you are, right? So I think that's
Yep.
an incredibly important story that you told to me.
And I remember having sessions with leaders about this because especially when in a situation where nothing is sure and
Mm.
nobody knows where they're going, everybody looks up at their manager going, fix it,
Yeah.
give me some answers, tell me where I'm going. And during the pandemic, the managers didn't know either.
No.
And when you're feeling so bad yourself, you don't want to know how bad someone else is feeling because you have enough of your own, like you just
Yeah.
said, you have your own
Yeah.
sorrows. And
Yeah.
yeah, I could talk about this for hours. All right, next, next question. Why is it necessary to be curious in order to be genuine in your empathy? You kind of talked about that at the start. You
Yeah.
need to be
Yeah.
curious more curious over kindness, I think I would say. Are leaders capable of being truly empathetic to other people's
Well,
other people's
yeah.
needs and concerns?
Well, I think we also need to differentiate, right? You can be truly curious and collect um, information that is very useful for decision making, but ultimately you're paid to make the decision, right?
Yeah.
So we also need to be honest about that you're hired as a leader to decide. You can't just go round and round and keep on asking, right? At some point, you have collected your information and you need to make an informed decision. Well, the good thing is you can make informed decision. Not everyone will like what they hear, because guess what? There's another bias that we have. Our bias is that we think that our idea is always the best.
Yeah.
It's proven. So
Yeah.
whenever you come up with a new concept, gathering feedback from your team to actually say, no, I don't think it's not good at all, right? Is very hard for humans. You're like, what? But that's my baby, right? So you're
Yeah.
attacking my thought, and myself. So it gets really personal. So again, having tools in place, and people do this quite well. And I heard an example that I really like, that people go to a meeting and they set a meeting in a safe environment to say, this is my idea. And I encourage everyone just to push it around as much as possible. And if you start that practice as a leader, others will come in and share their ideas. Is that easy? No. Do you
No.
need to have a good cup of tea or a glass of wine after? Probably. But do you get useful feedback and people feel safe to do so? I think that is very critical, but hard. It's hard. It's not
Yeah.
easy. but that could
Because
be
it's going to feel personal,
yeah,
whether you
another
like it or not.
mechanism.
It's going to
Yeah,
feel like a personal attack if people
yeah,
very much dislike
yeah,
your plan or
yeah,
your idea.
yeah.
Yeah.
But let's say if you introduce it like this already, right? The room will still give you feedback, but be kind in it, right? And constructive. Because we all have at one point have to present our baby, right? So that gives some balance as to how
And
respectful
it's
we do
easier to do it face to face, or at least in my opinion, than have them talk about your bad idea behind your back. So
that. Yeah, exactly, and it doesn't work, right? So that's another one that I think is very important.
brilliant. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. We have already one question from the audience. Keep them coming, guys. If you have any questions for Godelieve, please put them in the chat. Now is your chance. So the first question from the audience is, how can we ensure psychological safety at an organizational level, diluting the impact of behavioral and personality traits or individual managers?
Yeah. No, it is a team effort, right? It won't be if someone at the top does it. Although the messaging from the top is really important. So you'll have to actively train your cohort of managers, and please be mindful of your mid management. I think that's the layer that's always most under pressure. And again, are they looked after well? Because behavior is usually an outcome of how you're treated yourself. So do we have enough checks and balances in place to guide leaders at that level? And it's also something that I think you should actively measure and help with some tools, because sometimes also the culture we're in, right? I'm based in Singapore, and Asian culture, sometimes people find it difficult to provide direct feedback, right? And have that trust. So are there other mechanisms where you could get this feedback? And a safe one is probably using some kind of technology or a speak up box or whatever you're doing. And again, follow up, right? So listen and do something with it is what you need to do. So don't do only like the top layer or only the middle layer, right? It should be quite structured to create this, and keep on checking.
I think I just found my quote. I always try whenever I do a live session to find my quote of the day, and I think listen and do something with it is going to be is going to be the quote for today. All right, thank you so much. Now in the program we detail the difference in service level empathy versus genuine empathy and support. How would identifying this difference aid companies and help companies in making the transition from acting empathetic to actually being empathetic? Because I think one of the hardest things is if someone fakes to be empathetic,
Yeah,
if they pretend to care
yeah, yeah. Although it's where it starts sometimes, right? And you know the sayings of
yeah,
like fake it till you
make it.
make it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also know if from a just physical level, right? If you smile for 10 or what is it, 2 minutes, I think it is, then you'll feel better, right? It's a very unique thing to need to do. I mean, most cases, right? So there is, of course, a muscle that you need to build, right, in terms of having that feedback process in place, right? The constant asking questions. And also employees need to get used to it, because you'll find that people say, I just stop asking me all this, right? Just let me get on with it. That's also a very natural response, right? So for both to build that, you probably have to fake it till you make it for a little while, right? And it may
Yeah.
not feel as genuine, right? That I say, how are you, Cindy? And what have you been doing? I'm practicing a muscle of asking effective questions.
Yeah.
And you'll find that there are techniques for it. So for example, asking why is never a good idea. So any question that starts with why, get it out of your book, because why is like, again, you get defensive. Like, what do you mean why? Why I do this, or what are you? So having those language and body language is
I
extremely
never
important.
realized that's almost an attack, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Why?
It's
Why you do that, Cindy? And Cindy goes, well,
explain why you're doing what
yeah.
you're doing or why you're saying what you're saying. It's almost, yeah.
Yeah.
I never realized that. That's a good tip.
Yeah, so there are techniques, and mind your body language. I have a wonderful manager, and she's based in Hong Kong, and leads our Asia, Middle East, Africa region. So a wonderful woman. But she said, I used to have this habit and I didn't know I was doing it till someone points it out to you, right? It's like spinach in your teeth, right? Someone needs to tell you at one point. And she used to roll her eyes a lot. So till someone just said,
why are you doing that?
When you ask the right questions, so all the what and how questions, but
Not
when
the
I
why,
give
obviously,
an answer, then you look. So I think keeping that in check, and we in MERS also actively work with that. We call it the PQ, right? So you have the EQ. We all know the IQ, obviously the EQ, and the PQ is like what we call physical intelligence. So how do you carry your body and yourself and your voice? Again, my voice can make you feel comfortable or uncomfortable when I ask you a question, right?
Yeah.
So you need to also start sharing that with people and train them in it. So a lot comes with it.
Yep. PQ. I'm going to remember that one. That's a good one. I have a question from the audience. Could you share a few unique ideas to create and sustain an innovative culture?
Uh-huh. That's the big question, right? How you drive innovation, and there's a lot of research around it. Again, right? We love to research everything. Then I think
which is great because at least then we can say research shows.
Research shows, like one of these, yeah. The innovation needs process. And that sounds extremely boring because people have an idea like, oh, innovation just happens, a flash of lightning, and then you have this beautiful idea. Well, some of these inventions are truly, truly brilliant. But most innovation can be very simple things, right? That we do better in an organization. Just happens because there's this constant feedback loop going on. Like, hey, why are we doing it this way? Questioning. And that process then comes into place that we put it somewhere and then someone follows through it, right? So innovation is hard work, basically. So, but I think a curious mindset will help you because instead of assuming that's the way we do it because we've always done it this way, someone can say, hey, that's interesting. We do it this way. What if we tried something else?
What if we tried to change the process a little bit?
Yeah.
It sounds a bit like what I like to call planned spontaneity because you don't meet anyone at the coffee machine anymore in the kitchen while everybody's working remote, and everybody is missing those little tiny talks. And the only way to really get over them is to do planned spontaneity, to just say, okay, we're having a water cooler conversation, or we're having a and it sounds a little bit, not genuine at first, but if you just it's like everything. If you follow the process and if you just stick with it, and then it's definitely going to help. All right.
And one more thing on the innovation.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
And I know this is not the topic of today, but getting diverse views in a room will help with innovation because again, it helps you turn things up and down because someone else may say, hey, yes, and I think this, yes, and is going on.
Which can actually be easier during the remote working when you're working with a Miro or a Jamboard, or when you can put up Post-it, so even the people that would usually not speak up can still write something now and add their ideas.
Absolutely. And you can have bigger hosted sessions, and I can invite people from all over the world all of a sudden, right? Like you and I are sitting here today sharing different views. I mean, a lot also is now possible. So let's just take it and keep it.
Yep. And use diversity to our benefits. Absolutely. All right. In week 3 of the program, we provide a framework of compassionate questions to ask our learners, one of which is the I and me versus the we and us conversation. How important do you think such questions are to initially develop compassion, the I and me versus the we and us?
In terms of using that instead of to we
so using the we and us instead of the I and me. So those are the
that's an interesting one, right? I think I think that's also highly cultural, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think again, I'm Dutch like you, right? So in Western culture, I think there's more of I and me in terms of our expression, the language that we use. Whereas where I'm based now, since 15 years in Singapore, the we and us culture and team-based thinking,
Mm-hmm.
team-based performance, team-based recognition is extremely important. I have no real preference between the two, right? Because it's culture. Where it does help when I find people say I and me in a situation, it can also be very helpful, right? Especially because you acknowledge that this may be your own, right? Not it is this way or we think that it should be. Actually being very honest, like, hey, I think it's going this way, right? What would you think? It makes it actually also easier. So I don't have a real preference. I would love to hear what you think, Cindy, but
Well,
that's an interesting
I'm
one.
trying to figure it out, but I think it's a cultural thing because when I say we, it's probably we need to do something, and I mean my partner. When I say
Ah,
we,
so you need to do something.
we
Yeah.
need to do the laundry, and then I actually
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
do you want to do that for me? So
Yeah.
I think that's very much cultural based.
Yeah.
I think when I say we, I don't actually mean we a
No,
lot
you
of the
mean
time.
you. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean someone else than me.
Someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
maybe, well, I'm looking forward to that part of the course. I'll learn something as well on how to
Absolutely.
maybe use that in a conversation without it meaning we need to take out the trash. No, you need to take out the trash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, we have another question from the audience. Someone says, I personally feel leaders and managers play a pivotal role in building this safe environment, but what could we do to help build this safety? So not just the leaders and the managers, but the
Yeah.
how can all people really help build psychological safety? That is
Yeah.
such a tough question.
It's a tough question, and I like it because there is a tendency that I'm observing in organizations, especially for those that may not be the senior leaders, could be managers, but also the people in the organization to say, well, in in this company, there's no trust, or the company decided to, and I like to then always instill a bit of ownership, whoever points that out to me and say, well, the company doesn't do things or think or feel. It's the people in it that make the company. So when you're saying, oh, the company is not safe or there's no trust, the question then would be, that's an interesting observation. How do you see that, right? And what could you do yourself to instill a better culture? What would you like to see change, right? Um, to make sure that we all collectively make up the company, right? There are no excuses, right? You are it.
Yeah.
So don't hide
You're
behind the
in it, so you're
entity.
it.
You're it. You're it.
Yeah.
And that's also a message that we often have for new leaders, right? That have at the beginning say, well, they said that the leadership, but you are the leadership now.
Yeah.
So what do you think we could be doing? So I think it's a very empowering question to people. Because if you again truly want to listen to say, oh, that's yeah, we need to change it. I agree with you. Well, what would you suggest? And where do you see it where we can get better? So then people start to also share in that. I think.
And yeah, I think absolutely. And they should always, I think that the main thing for any business is if you have a common goal and you all
Yeah.
know what that goal is, then you know where you're going and you feel much more included. And
Yeah.
that would, for me, would be the starting point. If I wouldn't know where I was going, I would have no clue
Yeah.
who to go to, who to do it with, and
Yeah.
yeah,
No, great.
absolutely.
Great. Yeah, clarity of vision, right? I think more and more we see that people will join or leave an organization if there's no clarity, right? And
Yeah,
no amount of money will stop people to say, I just have no idea where we're going or where I'm going with this in this company. So fair
yeah,
point.
agree. All right. In this current world of uncertainties where organizations and employees alike are looking for stability, which are the major disruptors you think will be the toughest to deal with?
In terms of the disruptors of stability, sorry, can you repeat that question? I was looking at
So,
the chat, which I
no,
shouldn't.
no,
Right? Yeah. I'm seeing
don't
such nice
worry.
comments appear. I see like innovation needs process. I see we as an inverted me. It starts with me and then to we. So Javier, I think that's a beautiful.
Oh, that is brilliant. I am not seeing the chat because I know I'll get very super distracted. So
I shouldn't.
no, no, go right ahead. Go right ahead. It's a fireside chat, right? Everybody can speak up. I'm going to repeat the question if you're okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, don't worry about it. In this current world of uncertainties where organizations and employees alike are looking for stability,
Yeah.
which are the major disruptors you think will be the toughest to deal with?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know when we asked employees, and we do extensive research in Mercer as well around it, right? What they value the most about their job, pre-pandemic, job security scores the highest in general. So we as humans, which is fascinating, right? Because we wanted to ask more questions. Why do people say that? It's really that sense of community and belonging, and not having a sense that you're going to be thrown out, right? Out of your community, right? It takes up
Yeah,
so many big parts of our life. And also from an income perspective, right? You're never going to be happy with your pay. There's always someone earning more than you do, right? But at least the stability of having that income stream does a lot to human beings in general. And exceptions are there that enjoy that, but in general. Um, and of course, any pandemic or any depression, right, really throws people off because they already crave that. Then the economic disruption comes in, or environmental, whatever risk that we are under, which makes people very unsettled. And you'll see the wellness issues and the mental issues occur. I mean, it's to me, that's one of my biggest concerns. That keeps me awake at night. How do we, because we can't change necessarily the environment. You can see it, right? We're all trying. Of course, we need to do our part, but it's a difficult stage to go through. So how do I build resilience and energy in my organization is something that keeps me awake at night, because the disruptions will keep on coming in future
yeah.
as well. But how do we make sure people bounce back after they're hit? I think that's the biggest barrier to me is that, right? How do you build a resilient workforce to create a resilient organization that deals with change? Because change will
That can take
follow.
some blows and
Yeah,
still
yeah,
stay
yeah,
standing. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think that to me is the biggest barrier, is our own behaviors, making it hard to to sustain ourselves, right, and therefore the organization. And I think that how do we energize the workforce to continue to deal with this? Because I'm afraid it's not going to be the last challenge we have, right, in our lifetime. So
No, no. And I personally think we're going to see a lot of mental um, health issues
yeah,
after, mostly starting after the pandemic is
yeah,
over or under control, or when people actually have some time to breathe and think, okay, we made it through this. Now
yeah,
what? And I think we're going
yeah,
to see some issues there.
yeah.
One of the audience questions, obviously also a bit off topic, on empathy, but as we are very empathetic here, we're going to just ask it. What are the recommended strategies to reduce stigma about employees? Because it fits in nicely with mental issues at the workplace.
Oh, that's $1 million question, right?
Because
Um,
I think a lot of people, when you ask them, how are you? They're going to say fine because they don't want to say they're not fine because they
yeah,
don't know how you'll respond.
yeah, yeah. Now you have to instill it's okay to be not okay, right?
Yeah.
And we still look at mental health issues with such a different lens, right? And the recent Olympics, I think, have shown that very clearly. When beautiful American gymnast, right? She pulled out of competition because she wasn't mentally well, and the hoo-ha that followed, and
Yeah.
how dare she do that, not acknowledging that anything below the
That
neck,
this
right?
is
Somehow we're
important.
okay, right?
Yeah.
So if you have an injury, yeah, sure, but when it comes here, all of a sudden it's not real, it's not there. So I think part that has to be played is the acknowledgement that mental issues are true illnesses, right? That need to be treated, helped in whichever way possible, and not separating them.
And
And
also,
that's
mental health doesn't mean you're crazy, doesn't
yeah,
automatically mean you're on
mm,
medication
true.
and
Yeah,
that you're
yeah,
seeing a psychiatrist or a
yeah,
psychiatrist or whatever.
yeah.
It doesn't mean
No,
that there's something completely wrong with you. It just
yeah,
means you need some help at
yeah.
that moment.
Yeah, and you would get help also if you have a sore back, right, in your muscles. But that's perfectly fine to say. Whereas
Yeah.
in your head, that's the same thing. So I think again it's about opening up about it. So we've seen success where obviously there is good support available by organizations. So where can you turn to? And don't stop with employee assistance programs. They're great, but yeah, do you cover mental health in your insurance in Asia? No. So then what signal are you sending, right? So better not talk about it. Let people tell their stories. Let
Yeah,
leaders
I
tell
was
their
gonna say,
stories.
let it be safe to
Yeah, yeah,
and if you open up, and especially if the leaders open up and share their stories, it's gonna be so much safer for someone else to do
yeah,
so as well.
yeah, yeah. So I think
Brilliant.
that's going to be critically important for people, and make sure that you continue to communicate about it. I think setting up like a program and then leaving it somewhere that won't cut it, and build things around it, right? And even if it's get off Zoom for a while because we're looking after our mental health. Building into meetings that you check in the first 5 minutes and say, hey, it's
Yeah.
okay to not be okay. I was not feeling well. So, maybe you have a few things you want to share. So again, it's a culture of listening and opening
Yep.
the conversation.
I remember doing that with my team at Boeing, and the first couple of times it happened, I was like, "No, why are we wasting time on asking how everybody's doing? I'm so busy. Let's get on with it." And
Yeah.
after the second time, I was like, "I actually feel better," because one was having a grandparent's birthday that he was turning 80, and she didn't know how to celebrate because everybody was in lockdown. Somebody else was pregnant in lockdown and didn't know. And it felt so good to be able to just not be professional all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
brilliant.
hear
All
you.
right, thank you so much for that, Godlieve. So the People Matters BeNext program on building a culture of empathy for productivity and innovation will be very beneficial for, I think we just concluded that, very beneficial for leaders and for companies that are just getting started with building a more empathetic culture, or those that have already started implementing changes and want some guidance in fostering trustworthy cooperative connections that will result in a active and inventive organization. Now, before we close, Godlieve, would you like to share any closing words of advice for practitioners starting a journey to design a culture of empathy, trust, and compassion?
Talk about it. That is hard. I think again about the opening up, right? It's a journey that you're on, and I think it's a continuous journey to check in on all the funny ways and beautiful ways of being human, right?
Yeah,
And it's not something you roll out of bed and you can do it, right? That's not how it works. So it requires practice and reflection, and soliciting feedback on how you're doing. So keep those lines open of communication and know that you're not alone. For everyone, this is sometimes a painful process, right? To go through
yeah,
it, because you'll sometimes hear more than you like. So build on your own wellness while you do it. I think is probably my biggest piece of advice. And Cindy,
brilliant. Thank you. Good one. Thank you so much for joining us for this great conversation. I could go on for hours. Your thoughts, as always, truly inspirational. Give us a lot to reflect upon. I think still my quote for the day is listen and do something with it. I'm going to stick with that one for today. According to a recent survey by Business Solver, 87% of the CEOs feel empathy is directly related to a company's financial performance. So there's no way to return to the job model that existed prior to the pandemic. Let's just get one thing straight there. So our capacity to build a culture of empathy, trust, and compassion will be the difference for adaptive businesses. I think that's what I wanted to wanted to say. So if you enjoyed this webcast, I can assure you, you will love the full program starting on August 30th that both myself and Godelieve will be on, by the way, because we have so much more we want to share with you. We truly hope you will join us for the upcoming BeNext program on building a culture of empathy, which will start August 30th, like I said, and take this journey with us. My team will be sharing the link in the chat for you to visit the website, go through the program, and register. We have great other programs coming up as well, Agile and Design Thinking, the HRBP, Women Leadership, and a lot more good stuff. So please check out the website and register. Thank you all so much for your time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be kind to one another. And until we meet again, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.